Chapter 3: A War of Lies. A war of lies. Afghanistan.
A war that is supposed to feed the desperate people of Afghanistan will, in fact, help starve them. A war supposedly brought by Taliban intransigence was actually provoked by our own government.
A war that the majority of American people believe is about their grief, anger, and desire for revenge is really about cold-blooded calculations of a small elite seeking external power. A war that is supposed to make us safer by increasing the likelihood of future terrorist attacks. While terrorists coming from other religions have ethnic or other identity, those who are Muslims have essentially an Islamic identity. This also changes from place to place. It is true that some of the terrorists are claiming an Islamic identity, but that's not true in all cases. As such, Khalistanis also used Sikh identity. Even with this large spectrum of Islamic identity, the ones trained by CIA wore this identity very prominently on their sleeves and tried to present themselves as if they are doing jihad and killing kafirs. The textbooks for these madrasas were prepared in an American university. How did the indoctrination take place? As such, they were indoctrinated in madrasas specially set up for this purpose by the CIA with ISI's help. These madrasas were set up under the Kissinger doctrine of Asians should be made to fight Asians. So dangerous. How was all this formulated? This idea was formulated in the madrasas that the communists are kafirs because they do not believe in Allah, that killing them is a jihad, and those dying in this jihad will go straight to Jannat where 72 virgins are waiting for them. So how youth reacted to this? This concoction of US established madrasas had strong impact on the Muslim youth in some countries, who rushed to get training in these places with the readiness to lay down their lives for the US goal of occupying Afghanistan in the long run. Why this had to be done? Since US armies were totally demoralized due to the humiliating defeat in Vietnam, US CIA planned to set up madrasas in Pakistan in collusion with ISI. So were teachings of the Holy Quran distorted?
The verses of Quran exhorting the Muslims to kill the infidels, attacking them, were taken out of context to indoctrinate the young Muslim boys. As a matter of fact, these verses were meant for the war situation to protect the Muslims as a last resort.
When seen in isolation, it seems as if the advice to followers is to kill recklessly. When seen in the context, it was a war and it was a defensive struggle. How was all this put together? This seems to be a very motivated act. A special syllabus was developed in Washington to be used in these madrasas. These madrasas produced the Al-Qaeda breed. Osama bin Laden, again a US creation, was brought in as leader of Al-Qaeda and was provided with $8,000 million and 7,000 tons of armaments.
The indoctrination of Al-Qaeda Taliban recruits was aimed to join anti-Russian forces to defeat Russian army.
Did US do any image creation for Talibans? Yes, the madrasa's trainees, Talibans, were presented as freedom fighters by US during that period. The then US President Ronald Reagan had said, "These gentlemen are the moral equivalents of America's founding fathers." Ronald Reagan said this while introducing the Mujahideen leaders to media on the White House lawns in 1985.
How did US present the 9/11 event?
George Bush's statement exemplifies the US stance. Americans are asking, why do they hate us? They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other. George Bush said this in his speech in US Congress in the aftermath of 9/11 2001. These two statements show the real face of US. These two statements reflect the so-called transition of freedom fighters, of which US administration was proud, to the same ones being called enemies of US. When Tony Blair, in the aftermath of 7/7, uttered his feelings that our resolve to uphold our values is stronger than their resolve to break it, he was referring to the people with same ideology and politics whom Reagan praised to the sky and about whom George W. Bush had the total contrary view. So, there is a clever manipulation of the words like jihad and kafir in particular.
Yes, as we know, the historical meanings of these Islamic terms were much different in the beginning. Also, there are many an interpretation of these words. Only during the last decade and a half, Islam has been projected to be violent. The media and many a state apparatus have on purpose sold the image of Islam as being somehow associated with terrorism.
Muslims are no uniform community and there are different interpretations of Islam. The media highlights any sensational violent act and ignores the pacifist ones. Comments of fanatics are projected prominently as the Islamic voice. The sober and moderate statements are either ignored or find their place in some small corner of the media. What about present projection? What has changed during these decades? Have they changed? Or is it that US needs had undergone a rapid transition during this decade? The reference to the ghastly acts of terrorism of 9/11 and 7/7 does send the shivers down one's spine. Not only the killings of innocents, non-combatants in 9/11 and 7/7 is extremely heinous and cowardly, but also the aftermath of such actions is something one needs to mull over. It becomes clear then that what is called as Islamic identity of terrorists was used only in madrasas set up by CIA-ISI nexus, where gullible Afghanis and others were taught about jihad and kafir. The struggle, which began from injustices heaped by Israel, had the Palestinian identity. The one in Kashmir had the flag of Azadi or independence to begin with. Even here, religion has been the cloak, but for a few only. The misuse of the word jihad by fanatics adds to the problem.
Any act of Muslim terrorist is supposed to be a jihad, as some of them try to project it in that manner in order to enlist support. As such, holy war, crusade, dharma yuddha are not an uncommon usage in different religions, as kings have launched their campaigns for expansion in the name of their religions, time and again, and Islam is no exception. It is claimed by some that Allah wants to spread Islam by the sword.
Crusade, dharma yuddha, jihad, very bad, very bad.
It is jihad which is one of the pillars of Islam, precisely because it does not necessarily mean war. Jihad means utmost effort, not violence, and it is obligatory on Muslims to make utmost efforts in wiser manner to spread the message of Allah so as to create a just and compassionate society.
This is what is obligatory, not waging a war at all.
Prophet himself has exemplified it on many occasions, especially at the time of Sulh Hudaybiyah, that is, Peace of Hudaybiyah and Fateh Makkah.
So that's what jihad means? It seems to be so different from popular perception. As for the radical Islamist groups, jihad is being used as a cynical ruse to whip up religious fervor for their cause. Historically, jihad was used rhetorically by the imperialist powers to justify their worldly expansionist designs. In its original sense, jihad was more of an inner moral cleansing for the community. This was called Jihad-e-Akbar, the Great Jihad. But now, the whole notion of jihad is being used as an instrument for legitimizing militaristic, monarchic and dictatorial regimes. Word jihad stands for utmost effort or striving. It has occurred in Quran 42 times. None of the times it stands for war. Similarly, word kafir means one who hides the truth. This word was used for those who used to attack the new converts to Islam in a hidden manner. What about non-Muslims?
The terror suspects of Malegaon blast and probably other such like Ajmer Dargah and other which took place in front of mosque do have a Hindu identity, like one of them is a Sadhvi, another is a Swami.
Then what about the perception that terrorist violence is due to religions, especially Islam?
It is true that some fanatical fringe Muslims use certain radical interpretations and usage as eternal binding and believe that kafirs should be killed. But it is equally true that those who are hostile to Islam use this term to show the intolerance of Islam. This is incorrect.
Most of the ideologies develop their positive and negative terminology. Christianity, for example, has derogatory terms like pagan, non-believer. In Hinduism, there are terms like Malich, Yavana, etc. Islam coined the negative terms like kufr, that is disbelief, nifaq, that is hypocrisy, etc.
In 1979, after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the CIA and Pakistan's ISI, Inter-Service Intelligence of Pakistan Army, launched the largest convert operation in the history of CIA. Their purpose was to harness the energy of Afghan resistance to the Soviets and to expand it into a holy war, an Islamic jihad, which would turn the Muslim countries within the Soviet zone of influence against the communist regime and to eventually destabilize it. When it began, it was meant to be Soviet Union's Vietnam. It turned out to be much larger than that. Over the years, CIA funded and recruited 1 lakh radical mujahideen from 40 Islamic countries as soldiers for American proxy war in Afghanistan. Arundhati Roy, the algebra of the infinite justice.
These terms are many a time, or rather most of the time, used against different sects within the same religion. They are a tool in the hands of vested interests for their material gains and for the increase of social power within a group. Many a Muslim ruler used the word kafir while fighting against non-Muslim kings.
The same ones then struck compromises also with different kings.
But they did not fight for religion, they fought for power. We are aware that Muslim kings were in alliance with Hindu kings and also had Hindu subjects in large numbers, whose religious and other needs were considered by them. Example, Babur's will to his son Humayun. These worldly affairs, most of the time, have been given religious veneer for the benefit of the ruling groups.
If interpreted narrowly, these can attribute intolerance to a particular religion.
Some theologians have spread the myth about Ummah, a homogeneous world Muslim community. The truth is that there is no single goal or unified vision in the Muslim world. Different sects of Islam have serious differences with each other. Why are you harping only about Islam? True, one has to talk more about the demythification of Islam. The point is that all religions' moral values have a lot of overlap. Acts of terror have taken place due to various reasons, but not due to religion. After 9/11 in particular, the media has popularized the word Islamic terrorism, for the first time linking up religion Islam with terrorism. So one has to talk a bit more about Islam, the religion, from abuse of this religion, from political economic goals. Is it not that you are putting all hate blame of brainwashing of recruits of Al-Qaeda on US only? Is there nothing within Islam which has resulted in the rise of terror? Every religion is used as a cover by various political groups for various reasons. Many a dominant group and dynasties have used Islam to present their goals. They present Islam as intolerant and narrow. Such groups came in Saudi Arabia in particular. US indoctrination module picked up from this version. The major version of Islam prevalent in India is a Sufi one. In countries like Indonesia, Turkey, etc., a more liberal version is prevalent. But US wanted to indoctrinate the youth for its political goals, so this modulated version of Islam was taught in the madrasas controlled by CIA, ISI.
Many people wonder if all Muslims approve of Taliban.
In fact, the Taliban were condemned by a large section of Muslims. Ummah is one of the progressive ideas enunciated in Quran. In its original form, it struck at the roots of parochialism, tribalism, and narrow nationalism. It was an effort to create a Muslim personality that would not bear the lineage of race, tribe, language, color, and other parochial denominations. But in reality, in later centuries, this was designed as an exclusivist notion.
Muslims want to convert Darul Islam to Darul Harb. So, this violence.
The concepts of Darul Islam, the land of Islam or peace, and Darul Harb, the land of the war or enemy, are again used to project the lack of patriotism of Muslims in countries where they are in minority. In the Quran, there is a distinction between the land of the peace and the land of the enemy. But this distinction made sense at a time when the Muslim communities were trying to evolve a code vis-a-vis the rest of the world, which was mostly lawless. Today, in the plural, diverse world, we have seen different Muslim countries battling against each other for material gains. Also in South Asia, Bangladesh split from its co-religionist Pakistan in 1971 due to cultural, linguistic, and material reasons.
Terrorism is a tactic, not a political or social force in and of itself. Anyone can use it, and the idea that you can wage a war against it is as dishonest as the idea behind war on drugs. The use of food as a political weapon, indiscriminate aerial bombardment and arming of gangsterish groups of religious fanatics all count as terrorism by any reasonable definition of the word, and the United States has long employed all of them and more. This war is really about sordid material interest and power, and in defense of these interests, the US is prepared to shift the label terrorist as it sees fit to apply to all manner of dissident political movements and not just marginal bands of fanatics like Bin Laden's Al-Qaeda. Conversely, it is willing to call its own terrorists as freedom fighters, the way Al-Qaeda was labeled during the decades of 80s.
Maybe some of them will get transformed into terrorists again in a few years. It's a sick game and charade. The government is manipulating the very real grief and anger of the people of the United States after September 11 atrocities to get us to fall for it again.
But there is this term Islamic terrorism. What about that? The use of word Islamic terrorism was propagated by US media in the wake of 9/11 attack on WTC. It was totally wrong. Since then, it became part of popular psyche. So when suspicion of Sadhvi Pragya and Swami Dayanand in the blasts came to light, the word Hindu terrorism was thrown up by a section of media instantly. In India, this word Islamic terrorism was propagated and socially accepted.
But there are terrorists who are Hindu also.
So when the involvement of RSS affiliates in blasts came to surface, spontaneously the word Hindu terrorism came to be used. Now many people, especially those belonging to Hindutva politics, vehemently opposed this. Their point was, Hinduism is a tolerant religion, terrorism is not in the genes of Hindus, so this word is wrong.
As a matter of fact, the word Hindu terrorism is as much wrong as the word Islamic terrorism is.
So this word is wrong. The correct word should be terrorism due to political Islam and terrorism due to Hindutva politics.
That's a good point.
There is a perception that the recent terrorist attacks on World Trade Center and the consequent US aggression on Afghanistan and Iraq are an indication of the truth behind the clash of civilization thesis of Samuel Huntington. Samuel Huntington stated, "It is my hypothesis that the fundamental source of conflict in this new world will neither be primarily ideological nor primarily economic. The great divisions among humankind and the dominating source of conflict will be cultural. Nation states will remain the most powerful actors in world affairs, but the principal conflicts of global politics will occur between nations and groups of different civilizations. The clash of civilizations will dominate global politics. The fault lines between civilizations will be the battle lines of the future." These gems from Samuel Huntington, the philosopher of the new era, representing the age when America's economic and political domination over the world is close to complete. It is an era where America, along with its minions, is calling the shots all over the globe. It is an era when the non-aligned movement of yesteryears has been forgotten and the possibility of a world democratic order seems an utopia. The injustices done to large sections of Muslims in the Middle East and Africa have been showing backlash. The militant opposition of the Palestinians to the repression and occupation by Israel was initially expressed by the PLO led by Yasser Arafat. Are there other acts done by United States fueling discontent and so terrorism? The other acts of omission and commission by US and other hegemonic powers have left a sense of injustice among large sections of Muslim masses all over the world. One is also aware that the chances of international grievance settlement channels practically do not exist, with the UN being reduced to an insignificance and its Secretary General helplessly watching the might of imperialist powers attacking Iraq and soliciting UN sanctions in support of the terrorism of these powers.
UN is also watching from the sidelines America's aggression against Afghanistan and Iraq, with the aggressor this time not even bothering to get its action ratified by the world body, the facade which it kept so far.
In this phase, what is the way for the people of the world who feel that injustice has been done to them? How should they protest? Which doors should they knock for grievance rectification? This is aggressive terror aimed to dominate and control the world. This is the terrorism of the mighty out to enslave the weak. This state terrorism kills the innocent non-combatants like the ones in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like the ones who died in the US aggression on Iraq in 1991, like the ones dying in the streets of Afghanistan and Iraq.